The Get Up and Get Out podcast. I'm your host, Steve Crisell, the one that likes to sleep with his socks on. We're at episode 007 with Matt Shannon. Let's get into a little bit of information about Matt Shannon. He was a 6-year expat veteran living in Moscow. And if you Google him, he's definitely not the former Blue Jays baseball player. And he's definitely not a middle-aged old man with white hair who describes himself as fast-sailing, slow-living SOB. Those are the two other Matt Shannons that I found if you Google Matt Shannon. A short little bio about Mr. Shannon. He's a 31-year-old from Maine. He studied finance at the University of Maine and received his degree in 2011. In addition, he studied law in Russia and the UK. Over the years of his stay in Russia, he worked at Mail.ru, Hans Snellman, and most recently worked for Evershed Sutherland before leaving with his wife for the United States, where he currently resides just outside Washington, D.C. He works for a company called Shearman and Sterling, and today we're going to talk about a boatload of information, including bringing massive tips of do's and don'ts, along with points or pointers on staying safe, dating, working, relaxing, and traveling in Russia. So without further ado, let's bring on Matt Shannon. Let's get into the show. Matt, what's up, buddy?
How you doing? I'm doing well.
It's really great. So glad that you could find the time because you are now a father.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
As of January 20th. Thank you.
Really. So you're enjoying being a father. You're enjoying kind of the husband-father relationship that you have now.
Absolutely.
So you're hanging out. You're just outside Washington D.C. and we wanted to know, people. I know the people. They wanted to know. So what's the situation? Because we are filming this, we are recording this during COVID-19, 2020. So if you guys watch this 20 years in the future, we're actually self-isolating right now. That's why we're doing this whole Skype thing. And so can you just kind of give us a rundown? What's the current situation in your neighborhood, right? So,
Sure. Well, generally, I would say that Washington, D.C. has not really been hit like some of the other big cities in the U.S. Actually, it's kind of strange because it is one of the biggest cities in the U.S. if you count the suburbs. Washington, D.C. as a city is actually quite small. I think the population is 600,000 or something. But because of all the suburbs where everybody really lives, it's a couple million. I think 4 or 5 million people live in the immediate area. But even so, the number of cases is very, very low. I think I don't know, whatever number I say now is going to be 10 times different in a few weeks. But there were only a couple thousand cases in the immediate Washington, D.C. area. If you compare that to New York, for example, which is only a couple hours away.
Yeah, that's negligible.
Where there's 100,000 cases or more.
So you don't have anybody running around like in the supermarkets with scuba gear on, goggles, and
well, I'll be honest with you. Last week I went to the supermarket and bought food for a few weeks. So we haven't been to the supermarket in 2 weeks now.
Smart
almost.
Man.
So my wife wants me to go to Costco today and pick up some stuff. Let's see what happens.
Costco is one of those wholesale joints.
Like Metro and
like Metro, right? Like Metro, yeah. So we're really glad that you're safe. We're really glad that you have a wonderful, healthy baby girl. So you and Sonia, you guys moved to the States when?
It was May 2018, about almost 2 years ago. It feels like it was just yesterday, but
yeah, it's going to be
years
May
ago.
Soon.
Yeah.
Anniversary time coming up.
Right.
Yeah. And so I want to bring it back to, I guess, probably university,
Sure.
maybe even a little bit before. What started the connection for you?
I have kind of the strangest story as to how I ended up in Russia. When I was in college, I had never really traveled anywhere. I grew up in Maine, and we traveled to Canada all the time. So I'd been abroad technically, but I would say since we lived in Maine, we went to Quebec, and Quebec is actually very, very, very different than the rest of Canada. So I hadn't ever traveled anywhere. I was studying business, specifically finance. Every year, the business school did a kind of study abroad trip where they would go somewhere and sort of study international business for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Just so happened that the trip that year was going to Russia. I had a very good friend who was a year older than me, and he said, "Matt, the business school is going to Russia. You know, I want to go on the trip. What do you think? Would you want to go?" And I was like, "Well, heck, I've never studied abroad. I've never really even been abroad. Why not?" And so that was it. You know, I just decided to go on that trip. We went out to Russia. We went to Moscow, St. Petersburg, and then we went to one of the professors on the trip was from a little town called Syktyvkar, which actually is in the world news right now. It's probably the worst hit spot in Russia for coronavirus. And we went out there and we lived with a host family, and it was just a fantastic time. Fell in love with the culture, with the people. It was an incredibly interesting place, especially in 2009, which is when I first went to Russia. Very different than today in good and bad ways. It just felt like a completely different world compared to the United States. And I came back and I said to myself, I want to work in Russia. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to work in Russia someday. One thing led to another. I graduated, ended up working in Boston, quit my job. I said, this is a mess. I went to Ukraine for 3 weeks. It's not 3 weeks, 3 months. Came back. I said, all right, I got a taste of living abroad. I had visited. I'd now lived abroad for 3 months. I got to go to Russia. Came back, got another job in Boston, worked for 6 months. Like 2 or 3 months in, I bought a one-way ticket to Moscow. And I just was thinking, how am I going to tell my boss that I'm leaving here in a few months? And 2 weeks before I had to tell my boss, they called me in and they're like, we're closing the U.S. finance office. It means you're going to be out of a job. We will pay you 3 months salary, though. We're going to pay you 3 months salary so you can find another job. And I said, all right, it's fine with me. And they're like, that's it? I said, yeah, I'm going to move to Russia. And this guy, you know, like, this is 2013, beginning of 2013, just before I came to Russia. And I remember this senior vice president who came. It was a company called Brookfield, big Canadian company. Came to our office in Boston and was telling us this. And the look on his face when I told him, nah, I'll take the money and move into Russia. He was just, okay. He didn't even know what to say. I mean, everyone else he told this news to was upset. And here's this kid. He just says, I'll take the money. I'm going to Russia.
You could have just said, I'll take the money, and that's it. But you were waiting for the guy's
no,
face?
He asked. He said,
what are you going to do?
Yeah, what are you going to do? Are you going to look for it? And I said, yeah, I'm going to Russia. What are you going to do in Russia? He said. I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out.
I wonder if they felt at that very moment that they were actually losing like a really good guy that actually, you know, there's
my boss thought that. Yeah? My boss, I'm sure she was actually really worried. She was like, Matt, I'll help you find another job. And I was like, no, don't worry. I'm going to Russia. I'll figure it out.
I'm going to Russia. Some people go hiking for a couple days. Like some people go on a retreat, you know?
Right.
Matt's like, I'm going to go around the world. I'm going to go hang out in Russia.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
I'm pretty sure Russia's got the answer for me.
Right.
Did you study any Russian while you were in university?
No. Yeah. I had no formal Russian lessons.
So you went to the bookstore like a couple days before the flight. You got yourself one of those like quick learn Russian books, and then you realized like during the flight you're like, no.
I mean, I remember in 2009 when we went with university, I was the only one who could pronounce a few words in Russian.
Cool.
On the trip. And like the Russians, they loved me. And when we were in Syktyvkar, staying with the host families, the girl that I stayed with, she brought this back up with me, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. She's like, Matt, I remember the first time you were in Russia. We went to a nightclub, you had a lot to drink, and we were sitting in the taxi, and we were going home. And you told the taxi driver, "Я плохая девочка." And for those of you who don't know, it means I'm a bad girl. And we had no idea if you knew what you were talking about or if you didn't know what you were talking about, but the taxi driver thought it was, you made his day. And everybody was laughing very, very hard.
That's awesome. Я плохая девочка.
Exactly.
Awesome.
That was the beginning of my Russian language journey.
So this was you came in 2013 in May
Yeah.
2013.
I think it was June.
Okay, but
June. Yeah.
now can you explain to everybody under what you came with university, right?
In the very beginning, yeah, 2009.
Okay. And why did you want to come back?
That's a great question. I don't think I could answer the question. I found Russia so interesting and so different than the United States that I just wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand where people were coming from, how the cultural differences, and that was it. It was like a challenge almost. That's why I wanted to go to Russia. That's why I wanted to learn Russian.
Give us an idea of what your first impressions were on each of those visits, right? Just like give us like one sentence from each of the visits. 2009, you came. What was your impression?
It was just awe. I remember we got off the plane and we got onto a bus and we were just leaving the airport, right? I mean, I can't remember what year you got to Russia the first time, but I remember, everything it was, I wouldn't say run down, right? But it looked like the Soviet Union, right? It looked like what I had in my mind. It looked like,
Sure.
Some of the old films, and it's completely different now, which is unfortunate for a lot of people because they'll never see Moscow the way that I saw it. But again, I'll never see Moscow like the people who saw it in 1992.
No.
But it was just, I don't know. Words just couldn't even describe it. It was so different from me. It was so different. It was literally like being on another planet.
For me, when I came in September 27th, 2012, and I remember sitting in traffic on MCOD, the big highway, the big circle highway, and I was coming from I think Sheremetyevo. I took the Aeroflot 101 from JFK, direct flight to Moscow. And we're in the car 3 hours. It took us 3 hours. Now, where we were going was, if you understand where Sheremetyevo Airport is, we were going towards Lyubertsy and even further, like you're going to Ramenskoye. So eastern side of Moscow, outside of MCOD by about, I'd say 20, 25 minutes. That, without traffic, takes you an hour and 25 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes. It took us twice as long. It took us 3 hours. And my dog was with us from the plane. I took my dog with me. And so he smelled really bad because he didn't really have a very nice 9-hour flight in the baggage claim area. And I felt really bad. That's something I won't do. That's something I don't know if people listen to this and they say, I want to take my dog with me. Look,
I've taken my dog to and from Russia 3 times now, and I also don't recommend it. The actual sitting on the flight with the dog is fine. We have one that can fit under the seat.
Yeah.
But I've been asked to pay a bribe. I've been told the documents aren't real. Everything you can imagine, I've heard it.
That's more than me. I just, but thank God I was doing it from America to Russia, and there were no problems. But my dog was seriously in distress, and I don't think he was ever the same again. So let's get into some of the basics, right? So you came in 2013. Under what pretenses did you come having a job?
No, I had nothing.
So you had a tourist visa.
Yeah, I had a tourist visa and a suitcase.
Okay, and where did you get set up?
So actually, I spent all of the money that they gave me traveling all around Russia. So I traveled from Moscow to Novosibirsk over the course of 3 months, stopping in all the different cities, meeting different people, trying to sort of learn Russian. I could speak, I guess I would say, conversational Russian when I got there. But it wasn't good for much more than, talking at the bar. And I traveled around Russia, and then I ended up going back to St. Petersburg, where I had met a Dutch guy, and we were going to start a tourism company. This was towards the end of 2013. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who are listening, at the beginning of 2014, in Ukraine, there was political issues, and there were no tourists in Russia the next year. I mean, the ruble went from 30 to almost 80,
Yep.
and it was a complete mess.
Absolutely.
The tourist company didn't work. I was forced to start teaching English, which was okay. I think it taught me how to be resourceful, which is what I would tell anyone who's looking to come to Russia. I would say, look, if you got nothing else, you have native English if you're coming from a native English-speaking country. But you could do the same with German. You could do the same with Spanish. You could do the same with French. Even Turkish probably in Moscow might work. But I started teaching English in St. Petersburg to business people, which was a great idea, actually, because I started meeting people who could introduce me to other people. And through a long chain of meeting people, I met an American guy who was in Moscow. I was still in St. Petersburg. I remember talking on the phone with him in the podъезд of some building. And he's like, Matt, you should come to Moscow. There's a lot more opportunity here. I used to live in St. Petersburg. And so I taught English for a few more weeks. And I went back to the U.S. for Christmas. I said, I gotta do something different. I will be completely honest that the first year in Russia was the hardest year of my life. It was unbelievably hard. Having to, find work myself in another country, it's not something that most people can do. But I think that's what unites most of the people who end up in Russia, because no matter what kind of job you have, unless you're a highly paid executive, when you get to Russia, something's going to go wrong. One job's not going to pay you. They're going to fire you. You're going to lose your work visa. I mean, everyone I know has had an issue. And you got to just put your boots on, get out there, and you got to talk to people. And it taught me some great skills. And I ended up moving to Moscow. I started working at this wealth management company for 2 weeks. They wanted me to sell some kind of financial products that were not good.
In Moscow City?
I was. Yeah. It was terrible. I lasted for 2 weeks. I had studied finance, and my job was to call up expats and high wealth individuals, high wealth Russians, and try to sell them these financial products. Well, I studied finance, and I knew that they weren't that good. And I just said, I can't do this. I just quit. I said, I'm done. I'm not coming back. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, said, Matt, what are you going to do? We just moved to Moscow for this job, and you quit after 2 weeks. I said, I will figure it out. 2 days later, I was on Facebook. Someone made a post. We're looking for somebody who can translate from Russian to English and who likes video games. I was like, well, I haven't played video games in a number of years, but I bet I can make and tell a convincing story. And next thing I know, I had a job at Mail.ru, and I was doing marketing and translation. And so a week later, after I quit that job and I had no idea what I was going to do, I had kind of landed my first real job in Russia at Mail.ru.
And so did Mail.ru, how did the contract thing get set up? What did they actually offer you a visa or something like that?
No, of course not. Of course not. I was a independent contractor paid out of their Netherlands subsidiary into my U.S. bank account.
Nice. Nice. So at this point, you're still working off of a visa from a different company?
No, I was on a tourist visa.
You're still
Fortunately
on a tourist
for
visa.
Americans, yeah. So when I was in Russia, I spent. So you can get a tourist visa. It's good for 3 years, and you can stay each time in Russia for up to 6 months. But there's no stipulation how many 6 months in a row you can stay. So I had effectively stayed in Russia for 2 years straight on a tourist visa, leaving every 6 months.
Uh-huh. And how long were you gone? So at the 6 months, you would leave for what, a day?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember those days.
Before we got work visas, right? You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Technically, I wasn't working illegally because I was working, for a Netherlands company, right? A Dutch company.
Right. You were doing business on the soil of Russia, but you were actually doing work not for a Russian company.
You're getting into the semantics now, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like technically,
I have a very good friend who works in a Russian tech company. He makes very good money, and he's still not technically employed by that company. He's got a work visa from another third party. It's kind of nuts.
And how long has he been here doing that?
6 years.
6 years. It's amazing. That's
You
amazing.
know,
Well, I just talked to a mutual friend, a lawyer, and he just made a post on Moscow expats, and he's talking about how some of the rules have become even more relaxed for
Yeah.
Temporary residency, permanent residency, all the way up to citizenship and dual citizenship, where you don't
Absolutely.
have to renounce your current citizenship. You can just, in addition to that, you can have Russian citizenship.
Right.
It's really, really fantastic. What was the work atmosphere of working at Mail.ru as a
Well,
foreigner?
actually, it was fantastic. So I was technically not an employee, right? So I had like a guest pass, and I was told that I could come in every day if I wanted, but I didn't have to come in. That was the kind of stipulation to make it seem legit, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, they tried to model their office after Google, right? So there was a basketball court, volleyball court. This is all inside the office.
Mm-hmm.
They had a relaxation room. There was a juice bar. You could go and get fresh pressed juice anytime. You could have 10 glasses in a row. I mean, nobody was stopping you. They had a subsidized cafeteria with great food. It was really great. And then they had an area where you could sleep. They had these extra rooms. They had couches, PlayStations, Xboxes that you could go and play during the day.
So Matt's about to tell us that he actually subleased his apartment and lived at the Mail.ru headquarters.
I did not, but I had a coworker who did, a Russian guy. He literally slept in the office. I still keep in touch with the guy today.
That's awesome.
Nice guy, but he was
Somebody's
he was
gonna know
funny.
somebody that did that.
Right.
That's
But
funny.
I worked at Mail.ru for a total of about 2 years. After about a year, I actually started working at an international law firm in Moscow. Totally on the books. I was a real employee, got a work visa. It was actually through the American guy that I had met while I was still in St. Petersburg. Offered me a job, and I got into law firm business development, which is what I still do today. So that's kind of where the networking led.
So really quick, you worked at Mail.ru until when?
January 2017.
Okay, and then you flipped over to Hans Snellman.
So I actually did both jobs at once.
So you were working two jobs at the same time. You were working for Mail.ru and Hans Snellman at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long did that affair go on before you?
So I
severed ties?
did that for about a year. So one thing that a lot of people don't know is I actually even worked a third job at a tourism company in Moscow.
Doing what?
You might not even have known that.
I don't know that.
I was doing marketing. So they had it was a big Russian tourist company. So they were helping high wealth Russians travel around the world, rent yachts and whatnot in the south of France, that type of stuff. And then what they wanted to do was get into high wealth individual tours of Russia. So bringing foreign tourists to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So they brought me on. I sort of designed the website. They already had the website set up, but I sort of wrote all the content and all of that. And then I was contacting tour operators to try and get sort of build relationships with their clients, so they would send clients to Russia and this and that. And it was quite interesting. But again, it was on the back of the sort of crisis in Russia. Russia had gone from a country that people just didn't really think about to the enemy again, right? And so in that whole time, I was working 3 jobs. I would put in as much time as I could at the law firm. I was working probably 40 hours almost
just for
every week. Firm. Yeah, in the office. So I was like in the office there. The other 2 jobs, Mail.ru, they told me that I didn't have to come into the office. So I just kind of told the guy, like, look, I'll be online all day. You'll be able to get in touch with me. And I told them at the law firm. Right. They knew that I was doing the Mail.ru stuff on the side, but I did most of the work at night because it was project work, right? So they'd give me a huge translation project, like 40,000 words.
Yep.
And then I'd have 6 months to do it. And so it was nights and weekends.
That's pretty good leeway. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it wasn't 6 months for 40,000 words. I don't remember the exact numbers, but they would give me a huge project and they'd say, look, it doesn't have to be done until, 3, 4, 5 months from now. And so there wasn't a lot of day-to-day, like, can you do this? But occasionally they'd send me requests like, look, Matt, we got to translate this, or can you do a Facebook post, 2, 3 times a week in English for English audience. I didn't say it, but it was actually a mobile game studio that I worked for at Mail.ro. So it was actually quite interesting.
Video games. Mobile games.
Phone games.
That stuff took off. So now let's talk about living in Moscow. So you lived in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Just to test the waters, which place do you like better for living?
Without a doubt, Moscow. Without a doubt, Moscow.
Okay. So Moscow.
I could go into 45,000 reasons why.
So give us three. What are some of the three top ones that come to your head?
The biggest difference is actually just the level of development of the cities. I was an expat who wasn't sent on a huge $250,000 salary. You have to almost live like a local, right? So living not downtown, you're living 5, 6, 7 stops from downtown on the metro, and just the level of development is very, very different. I lived about the same distance away from the center in both cities, but in St. Petersburg, there was in the winter, they didn't plow the streets. It would rain all the time, and it would be, the sidewalks would be covered in ice. No one would throw salt down. Just craziness. You see old babushki, falling down and getting hurt, and it just wasn't good. That's the first thing.
You're
just
talking about
the overall care of,
right?
overall care of the city. It was very different in St. Petersburg. Now, my wife will disagree. We met in St. Petersburg. She studied in St. Petersburg. But really, it was different. And then the second aspect is just the internationality of the two cities. No one knows this, but St. Petersburg is also one of the largest cities in Europe. I think only London and Paris are bigger than St. Petersburg, and Moscow, obviously. But in terms of European cities.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that
5 million
people?
People. 5 million people live in St. Petersburg, right? So it's a huge city,
wow. But
it still felt like a tiny town.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of international restaurants. The expat community is, it's got to be 20 times smaller than Moscow, maybe even smaller than that.
It's almost non-existent, but
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of my friends are Russian, but still, you crave that sort of international connection with people sometimes. And in St. Petersburg, I found it hard to get. That was another thing. Not having great international restaurants. That's kind of a negligible thing, but it still impacts, right? If you want to have Thai food, you want to have Indian food. It was hard to find any options in St. Petersburg. When I lived in St. Petersburg, there wasn't a single Vietnamese restaurant. And at the same time in Moscow, there was probably 100. So it was just, the little things, but if you put them all together, it adds up. And I also found that people in St. Petersburg love to talk about politics. I hate talking politics. And every time I would get in a taxi, they would ask me a question, because they love to talk in St. Petersburg too. And they'd notice that I had an accent, and they'd ask me where I was from.
Where you're from, right.
And then the next question would be, what is Barack Obama doing? I said, so Barack Obama, he is like my boy. And this is exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. And it would just annoy me, actually. And nobody in Moscow so I lived in St. Petersburg for almost a year and a half probably, and political questions every day, all the time, everywhere you go. You're the American, what do you think about Barack Obama? And then in Moscow, in the entire 3.5 years I lived there, almost 4, not a single question about politics like that, unless there was like a long discussion. But it was never a conversation starter like in St. Petersburg.
I'm gonna ask you a question that's not political about St. Petersburg. Where was the best place that you really like to eat?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. The one thing I missed about St. Petersburg, they had this, it's called a Praxin Dvor. I don't know if you've spent a lot of time in St. Petersburg, but it's this like market that's in the center of the city, which is abnormal actually in Moscow, because these types of markets in Moscow are in the middle of nowhere. Abnormal for Russia, I'm sorry. But it's this like 2x2 block market. You go in, and there's not a person anywhere, right? There's people from all over Central Asia selling clothes, dried fruits, and there's all kinds of different food in there, from shashlik, but there was this Chinese restaurant, and it was like $2 for lunch. And I would go there almost every single day when I was teaching English in St. Petersburg, and I would get lunch, $2. It was fantastic Chinese food. Everyone in there knew me. They couldn't speak Russian or English, so I had learned a few phrases in Chinese that I would say to them, and they thought it was fantastic.
That's awesome.
And that was by far my favorite place. But there are a number of places like that in Moscow too that I found over the years that were even more interesting, but they were really far away, and it was really hard to get to them. Usually there's no metro to get to them. And my favorite place in Moscow, there was a Vietnamese place like this. They just had like 6 or 7 different restaurants and all kinds of these different Vietnamese businesses for Vietnamese people in the middle of nowhere, Moscow. I remember one of my friends from America came to visit, and I said, I want to take you to this really interesting place. And I took him there, and he couldn't shake the feeling that we were not supposed to be there. He was laughing at me because we went into the Vietnamese place, and all they could speak in Russian, they could say, "Ris ili lapsha," which is noodles or rice.
Yeah.
And that's all they could say.
We'll have to get back there. My wife and I were just there just before we got home, and then we went on quarantine. We went on self-isolation. So we just came back just in time. And we actually had really great weather. It was just what was it, March, end of February, and then they sprung the laws on us, and we had to lock ourselves in. But I really enjoy St. Petersburg. I
was a tourist destination. It's fantastic, but to live there, nowhere near like Moscow.
Why don't you talk to us about Expatriant?
So what we wanted to do was we wanted to give everyone the resources to do what I did, right? Because it took me a bit over a year to get a real job at the law firm, Hannes Snellman in Moscow. And I was just thinking, all of the connections I made, all of the things that I did, all of the mistakes that I made along the way. I mean, how do we give all of that information to someone else so they could do what I wanted to do, but land a job in 30 days? So we created Expatriant, where we talk about how to get a job in Russia. There's another thing that we're trying to get off the ground here. We have a service provider that we work with. They are able to help set up a company. So let's say you're a remote employee in the U.S., right? You have to pay, it's probably almost 30% tax, right? Now, let's say you're willing to move to Russia. You can move to Russia, set up a company. It's only like $1,500. Run your income, so you can ask your company to pay your company instead of you personally. So your company would then pay less, right? Because they would pay no taxes if they're just paying for a service from another company. And then you, if you live in Russia, only have to pay 13% income tax on all of that. Yeah. There's so many opportunities out there that nobody's talking about. And one of the things that we found was that everyone likes to keep this stuff a secret, right?
Truly.
We don't want it to be secret. We want everyone to know what all of the options are, where you can go in the world, how to do it, step by step. Now, granted, you still need a lawyer to do a lot of this stuff, right?
Yep.
Because you want to go to Slovakia, you can't open a company speaking English. You can't fill out paperwork in English. You have to do it in Slovakian or Slovak, sorry. And so, we also find verified lawyers in all of these countries and towns and cities that you can work with, knowing that, they know what they're doing. And so that's what we want to do. We want to show people, here are the steps. Here are verified lawyers that you can work with that we know and we trust that you can work with to do this. So bringing transparency to the legal system of all these countries, that's our goal, on top of helping you find a job, if that's what you want to do instead.
There's the logo. It's Expatriant. There's the website, expatriant.com. Really, really cool. And we need to come back to the tangent about the women.
I knew you wouldn't let it go, Stephen.
I'm not a good fisherman, but I just reeled it back in, and I said, we've got to get back to the women. What do you think of Russian women? I
mean, we could spend 30 seconds on this, or we could spend 30 hours.
let's do 30 seconds because 30. I gotta eat. I gotta eat soon.
Just kidding. But
no, I mean,
but really, it's
you're married to a Russian. I'm married to a Russian. You know, go back to before you were married. Go back to even before you were dating your now wife.
look. Here's what I usually try to boil it down to. You know, Russian women have relatively low expectations of men. American men have relatively low expectation of women in general. Mm-hmm. And so when you get those two together, both have low expectations of each other.
Right.
But both are good people. You realize that, I mean, it just works. It just is kind of like a natural. And I'd be really interested to hear what American women think of Russian men, because I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that there is as much sort of synergy there as there is the other way around. It's all about managing expectations, right?
That's right.
That's what I think it boils down to, and that's why I think it works so well.
I got just a few more questions for you. What was the easiest and hardest part of your transition moving to Russia?
That's a great question.
Start with the easiest. What was
the easiest part? Was just showing up. It was easy to just get a visa and show up. And then everything after that was way more difficult than I had anticipated. I mean, not that I had no idea what to expect, but I thought that it would be easier to find a job in Russia than it was. And it might have been had the Ukrainian crisis not hit.
Right.
That was
right, with Crimea. Yeah.
You know, when the ruble went from 30 to 75 in a matter of a few weeks, it was like, oh no. I mean, this is.
Yep. I remember.
This is real.
I was making $5,000 a month, and then I went down to making 100,000 rubles a month.
2,200. Yeah.
I don't remember what it was at that time, but 100,000 rubles at that time at 80. So
yeah.
Do the math. That was tough. That was because you get used to that luxury, especially when you don't have rent to pay, and then you have to pay rent on making 100,000 rubles a month, and I was just like, what?
Yeah. Well, when I worked at Mail.ru, that was my salary, 100,000. And it was right after the Ukraine crisis, so it was about the same time.
Yeah.
And rented an apartment for 40,000, had 60 on the side.
That's what we have. We have a pre-revolutionary in Sokolniki, and it's 40,000 a month. We got lucky. 40,000 now. Which
wow.
Really, I mean, we've been here just over a year, and it's great. It's great, and I'll tell you why it's great, because especially right now. So if you guys are listening, you're thinking about coming to Russia. This is something that actually happens every year. For about 10 days, they shut off the hot water. So if you don't have a hot water boiler in your apartment, you got to go to the gym for 10 days and go shower, unless you like showering like the Chinese, because you're gonna have cold showers for 10 days. You could stretch it. You could stretch it if you want. Talk to some friends. But right around now, when the weather starts picking up, they shut off the heating, and then they start periodically going through the regions of Moscow, shutting off the hot water for 2 weeks for maintenance purposes. And I lived in a kirpichny dom, or a brick building, 8 floors, 9 floors, and we didn't have hot water for 2 weeks, and that was brutal. That was brutal. So
I remember
those types of things. I remember that you have to get used to as a foreigner. I lived in Germany. You living in America. You get used to these things that you just take for granted. Customer service, things like that. Not being able to speak the language or read. But if you're interested, these are the things that you got to do. If you're interested in immersing yourself, I've talked at length about the different echelons, right, of expats, right? So you got, the people that come and they're making, we've got Filipinos that are making, 40, 50,000 rubles a month. And then you've got the teachers that are working for some crappy, no good language studio making 80,000 with promises
Right.
of free living, and the place that they're put in is crap and garbage. And then you get into like the teachers that'll teach at better places, or maybe they'll teach at international schools, which really do some really great jobs with their packages. And then you get into like, the business guys that are making some really good money, and then you have the diplomats, so you have like this whole like onion, right? That you're just peeling back the layers of different expats. And we kind of fall like, I guess if this were the top, and this were the bottom, we'd probably be somewhere like maybe just under the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not at the middle. We weren't.
No, come on. Cool. I think you're selling yourself short.
You think
so?
So? You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking with someone the other day. We're trying to get this, help people open their companies in Russia, and he was asking me, how many people do you think get high qualified specialist visas?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. About the number of expats in Russia, how many of them do you think have a highly qualified specialist visa?
I have no idea.
No, I think it's very. I mean, I didn't know hardly anyone.
Low. I'm sure it's low.
I didn't know hardly anyone.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, see, you're in an international school, so they're paying all of the teachers enough to get one, right? But if you think about all the language schools, not a single one is paying an English teacher $167,000.
No, language schools, no way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're lucky. You're lucky if you get 150.
Yeah. I'd say 40% of the expat community is probably English teachers, or somehow connected to English, maybe English editor, whatever.
Teaching capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them are getting visas.
Well. Yeah.
So
I used to hear horror stories of people being on 90-day tourist visas, running in and out.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Matt, let's go with one last question.
All right.
Okay. And then I'll ask you how people can find you again, and we'll hug it out.
Okay? All right.
If you could only give 3 pieces of advice to our listeners who are thinking of moving to Russia, what would they be?
All right.
Right.
I would say, first one, don't underestimate your native language. I think this is something that people don't ever think about, and they think, well, I'm a native English speaker. What can I do? Teach English? Wrong. If you have any sort of professional experience, you can take that and you could potentially become, in the very worst case, like an English editor, right? You can take professional experience in the U.S., native language, go over to Russia, you could be an English editor at a consulting firm. That's like the lowest level, but you're still going to be making decent money by Russian standards. And you can take that and you can pivot then by learning Russian into a more professional job, like I did with business development. The second thing I would say is learn Russian. I mean, if you really want to be successful in Russia, unless you're a highly paid executive with international experience, you have to know Russian. And we could go into a 3-hour talk about how to learn Russian. But there are so many ways, there's so many resources out there to learn Russian. We have a little guide on our website, actually, of where to learn Russian and how to learn Russian in Russia, in Moscow specifically. But I would recommend going to a small city for 3 months and just meeting people and talking to people. Go to the bar every night. Have a few drinks. You'll start speaking Russian. That's how I did it.
That's how I did it.
And then the third piece of advice is be ready for hardship. No matter what you plan for in Russia, it's never going to go exactly to plan. Never. So be ready. And I think that's the best skill that one can learn in Russia, actually, is being able to think on your feet and pivot, right? Because maybe you get there and there's a crisis and the ruble falls from 30 to 70 and you got to do something. You got student loan payments. You got to figure out something.
Yep.
Or you can go home and tell everyone you failed. And that was never an option for me.
Yeah.
So,
we are so glad that you are here with us and that you shared with us a couple of your stories, giving us a great insight to, what to expect, really,
right.
What to expect from thinking about coming to Russia, and even just the overall arching idea of, leaving your country, be prepared for, difference in mentality.
Well, this is actually real quick. I just want to say,
go ahead.
Everybody's kind of started asking me, Matt, what are you going to do if shit hits the fan and everybody loses their job in the U.S. because of this coronavirus? I said, we're moving to Slovakia. I'll open a company in Slovakia. We'll start something. We'll do something, right? The skills that you learn going to a place like Russia enable you not to be afraid of anything, right? Because there's always a way. You become resourceful. You're never the woe is me guy. I don't know what I'll do if I lose my job.
I think
I'll take a new baby and I will move to another country and we will start a company. Doesn't matter.
There's way too much of that in America.
I know.
Way too much. Oh my God, what's the government going to do for me? Or what am I going to do now? Right? And I love the mentality of a lot of the immigrants that live in America. They're like, oh, it's just like back home. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You make it happen. You make it happen. You stop, throwing your head in the sand. You pick yourself up and you make things happen. For that, I can definitely say that, Matt, you are, there's a little bit of Russian in you.
I had a very good Russian say to me relatively recently. He says, Matt, ty abrusil. You might not even know that word, abrusit, but it means to become Russian.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down.
And I took that as a compliment.
Did I do it right?
Yep.
All right.
Abrusit. You can ask your wife about it when we get off the...
I wrote that down. Thanks for the Russian lesson. Matt, thank you so much for having time for us today. Thank you for coming down to the Get Up and Get Out podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the group before we go?
Look, if you're interested in moving to Russia, we are creating the best source of information for anyone who wants to go to Russia. And the best part is, since we're new, if you want us to write an article about a certain topic or area of interest, let us know. Reach out to me. We'll write the topic. We'll do the research, all for free. Don't worry. We're just getting started, so we want to help.
What's the email address that they can send information to?
Well, you can just contact at expatriant.com.
Contact at expatriant.com. You like that, Matt, right? On the fly. Right? So, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Matt, thank you for coming on down. A good friend for many years. Wonderful parties, wonderful times. We always,
you remember the law firm party?
I barely. But we had so many great times. We do look forward to doing it again.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it. Can't wait to see you again next time I'm in Moscow.
Matt, thanks for coming on. It's time to get up and get out. So let's go.
All right. See you later, Steve.
Ciao.
Thanks for having me.